Welcome to this very brief sort of snapshot into what, in my experience, are sort of the motivations behind unintentional plagiarism, what plagiarism is, and how you need to prepare yourself to avoid it over the course of our 1102 course. We're big fans of Phineas and Ferb in my household. We have a toddler. You might actually hear her in the background. I hope not, but if you hear sort of a screaming banshee in the background, very excited one, very enthusiastic one, that's my toddler Maggie. Anyway, I saw this when we were watching an episode a while back, and I thought, I think that might fit well into this because I think it might actually go to the heart of what the motivation for plagiarizing is, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Really, it's just a way to use Phineas and Ferb in any way possible for my classes. So let's enjoy a little Professor Doofenshmirtz, and then we'll talk about plagiarism.
I think it's best expressed through song. Tell me what you think, but no pressure. Back in class, Evil 101, I always had so much fun. Though the one who advised me openly despised me, still I always tried to be number one. Well, I wanted a mentor to share my worldview, but I got a tormentor. I was hated, it's true. Now I have one more chance, and it could mean my advancement. So there's only one thing I must do. I must impress my professor.
He's got to be good.
I must impress my professor.
He's misunderstood. He needs validation for his evil creation.
Like any good evil scientist. I must impress my professor to be a success, or I will still be a flunky, a diploma-less monkey in the eyes of this person whose opinion may worsen if my evil invention's not great. I must impress my professor. I must impress my professor. I must impress my professor before it's too late. So, now you know my plan.
All right. Well, I think that sometimes it becomes almost, really daunting when you start a new class because you have this professor that you're hoping to impress. I think I choose to think that that's really what a lot of the impulse to go to the internet and find things that smarter people have said, or so you think, and include them in your paper without attribution. I think that's where that comes from, this desire that you don't think your ideas are good enough. So first thing that we're going to talk about is, where does most plagiarism come from? And this is in my experience at Florida Gateway and in teaching for the last 12 or so years. The first is what I said, and what I think Doofenshmirtz sort of alludes to is believing that your ideas are not good enough, or that there's this incredible pressure to perform. If you believe your ideas are not good enough, then you're going to want to look for someone's ideas that are better. And let me just say this, 1102 is not about coming up with the most original idea or coming up with the best and most adventurous idea. It's great if you do, certainly, but 1102 is a writing class. It's really about practicing your writing skills. Your content is graded, but really I'm looking for your structure. I'm looking to see how you're communicating your ideas. It doesn't matter what those ideas are, and I know that sounds weird. I'm asking you to come up with ideas. I certainly want you to do what the assignment asks you to do, but it should never be so much pressure about the content of your ideas that you feel like you need to use somebody else's without attribution. The second reason that I think this happens is leaving work until the last minute. I'm a procrastinator by nature as well. I totally understand this, but when you leave work to the last minute and you're looking at a paper and it's not long enough and you think it's not good enough and you're just really struggling, it's really tempting to just click on that browser button and type in the title of your work, the work that you're working on, and to find all these Spark Notes or all these people who have answered Yahoo questions or any number of things that you might find. It's a dangerous thing. At 3 a.m, I think none of us are really thinking as well as we can be, and so that can be really a problem. The third reason is that you're still confused because either you refuse to or are afraid to ask questions. I don't really have much sympathy for this because if you're not asking me questions, I can't help. Because this is an online class, I'm not going to be able to look at you in class and know that you're confused by the look on your face. I don't hear from you. I assume all is well. I'm going to assume that assignments are going to pop up when they're due, and that's it. If you don't ask me questions, I can't help you. If you don't ask me specific questions, it's going to take us a really long time to get around to what you're really confused about. So this is on you guys. You have to do this. Ask the questions if you don't understand. And then coming down to what I think is really not very often that this happens. I choose to believe in the good in people, but being unwilling to do the work. If you really don't want to do the work, you're lazy, if you will, or you've done this before in other classes and you've gotten away with it, you're overloaded, whatever. If you're unwilling to do the work, plagiarism can look like a good way out. And then the last one, of course, is just the desire to cheat. You want to see what you can get away with. You want to see what you can accomplish without accomplishing anything. Let me just say this, and I say this in the syllabus. More than likely, if you plagiarize, I will catch you. I'm really good at it. And if I were you, I really wouldn't test me on that because I'm really, really good at it and I'll find it. All right, next. So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism occurs anytime you use anyone else's ideas, words, or images without giving the author or creator credit anytime. So if I had used that YouTube clip as a source for one of my papers, I would have had to cite it. Because I'm using it as a lecture element, I probably still should have had a works cited thing, honestly. But because I said this is Phineas and Ferb, this is a show, I kind of talked about it in the context of what we're doing, and I'm not really citing anything else, I could probably get away with it. And you could probably get away with it in that case too. I would say, you probably need this, but you're not just using something without attribution. I'm not pretending that Phineas and Ferb is my work. And that's really what we're talking about here, is when this is not a case where you're quoting something and you forget an in-text citation, or you're quoting something and you don't format your final works cited page correctly. I'm talking about where whole sections I can find on another site, or I can find in another work, and those things are completely taken and there's no indication of any kind of citation. So if you're talking about the source and you don't have an in-text citation, it's a little bit of a different animal, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. All right, you do have to give them credit. Okay, so how do you prevent plagiarism? First is to cite, cite, cite. Cite anytime you use a source. There's two different types of sources. There's a primary source, which will be like your textbook, the works that we're using out of the textbook. So any poem, any play, any story, that's a primary text. And then you might have secondary texts that are going to be things that you use to support your own ideas. So that might be journal articles, websites, whatever. You need to cite for both of them. So just because you're using the textbook doesn't mean that you have no responsibility to cite. You still need to cite anytime you're using a source. So you need to learn how to use MLA citation. That's what I'm going to expect. I expect that every one of you has used MLA citation at some point in 1101. If you haven't, then you're behind the 8 ball and you really need to get some kind of background on MLA. I strongly suggest that you just Google MLA style guide and look at any number of reputable sites. One of them is the Purdue Online Writing Lab. I suggest that you might Google MLA Style Guide and Purdue OWL, and I think you'll find some good information there. You need to learn how to use MLA. If you don't already have a handbook from 1101, then you definitely need to find yourself some kind of resource on the internet that will help you. It's not acceptable to just pretend like you don't know what's going on. I'm telling you right now, you need to use MLA and you need to use it correctly, and I'm going to be looking for you to do that from the very beginning. This is 1102. You've already passed 1101. You should have been accustomed to doing this in 1101. Learn the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Sometimes I think people think that unless it's in quotation marks, you don't have to cite. That's not true. Anytime you paraphrase it, which means put it in your own words, anytime you summarize it, which means take it, condense it, and put it in your own words, or quote it, taking it word for word, anytime you do any of that, you have to cite. So that means anytime you use any source, you have to cite. So that means that every paper should have both in-text citations and a final works cited page. You don't have either or, you have both. They work together. The in-text citations help to tell us what to look for on the works cited page, and the works cited page gives us all the information to find the source that you're using. Okay? So if this was a paper for my class, then after this slide, after the content of the lecture, I would need to have a works cited page for the Phineas and Ferb clip that I just had. Okay, so let me just say this again. Plagiarism is anytime you use anyone's ideas without attribution, without citation. Cutting and pasting is not an appropriate way to use source material. It's very dangerous, it's very tempting, and I'll catch you and it will be bad. I'm not trying to threaten you, I'm just trying to tell you that the consequences, as it says in the syllabus, the consequences for plagiarism start with failing the assignment, and it goes from there. Okay, if you fail a major assignment in my class, it's going to be really hard to pass just because of the way that it's structured. You can still do it, but it's going to be very difficult. The best thing to do is just to have some confidence in your own ideas, have some confidence in your own abilities, and to move on and just do the best you can. I'm looking for the structure. I'm looking for your work. I'm looking for your ideas. I'm not interested in what Joe from the internet has to say. If I was interested in that, I could look it up myself. Okay? So that's just a little bit of my position on plagiarism, what you need to be worried about. I will say this, there's always at least one person in every class who plagiarizes, and I catch them. And it's bad. And I hate it. I really, really hate it. I'm not out to get you. It's just really obvious when people plagiarize like this. And it's my responsibility to hold you accountable to the ethical guidelines that we, as all scholars and students, follow. So that's my goal. Please don't do it. It's not worth it. If you have questions or concerns, email me, and we can resolve them as best we can. It's much better to do that than to fall prey to the temptations of the cutting and pasting of internet sources, many of which are not good anyway, let me just tell you. All right. Okay, so that's plagiarism.